Hello everyone, my name is Simeon and today's lecture will talk about arrays. So this is a very fundamental data structure that you're going to be using when you start real life coding or when you go to work somewhere. So please be concentrated and most importantly do all your exercises and do a lab which we're gonna do together in class, because the only way to understand arrays is to practice them and to try to write simple programs using arrays, iterate over arrays, and read information from arrays, store information inside arrays, and so on. So what are we gonna speak about today is initially we're gonna start we're gonna see what is the definition of an array, what is actually array, what data structure it is. Then we're gonna see how to initialize array and how to process them. Also we're gonna speak about something really important when it comes to passing variables into methods, and this is depends on if the variable is valued or a reference type of variable. This is something really important, and those questions, like when you go to an interview, even for senior developers, they can ask you what's the difference between value type versus reference type. And then we're gonna talk about how to read from array and how to print arrays. Again, this is something very trivial, but you can't understand it only by looking at the presentation. So please prepare Visual Studio opened, create a console application, a new console application, and be ready to write some code with me. Okay. So let's begin with the lecture. So as we mentioned, arrays are a fundamental data structure that are very widely used. And what actually are arrays? They're data structure that hold a sequence of elements. And all the elements are numbered from 0 to length -1. You're going to understand what does that mean a little bit later. And also something very important, that elements are of the same type. You can't store in one array, you can only store one type of element. Let's say if you want to store integers, you can only store integers. And you declare this when you initialize the array. You're going to see that after that. So also arrays are a fixed size. So when you declare them, you declare also the size and the type of the variable you're going to be needed. This is because the program needs to allocate some space in the memory for this array, right? And it needs to know what the type of the value you're going to be storing, and from that type it knows that, for example, one integer can be 8 bytes, let's say, and you want to have one integer, you want to store integers, and you want to have array of length 10, right? So it knows that one integer is 8 bytes, and you want to have 10 integers inside. So it will allocate 8 multiplied by 10, and it will allocate 80 bytes for this array. So this is actually what an array looks like. As you can see, this is the whole array. The array is of size 5. You can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements inside, and at each cell only one element is stored. And how do we access and how do we write on and from the array is by using those element indexes. And something very important is that indexes start from 0, not from 1. So that's why we have here that those statements that the elements are numbered from 1 to length minus 1, right? From 1 to length minus 1. Why length minus 1? Because we start from 0, we don't start from 1. If we started from 1, we're gonna have from 1 to length, right? But right now, we have from 0 to length minus 1. So if we are going to be having an array with 5 elements, the last element will be at index 4, not at index 5. Okay, so how do we allocate an array? Is something very simple. So what we do is we initially state the type of the variable that's going to be stored, and this is the symbol that indicates that we want to have an array, not an integer only. And after that we have this new int keyword, and we need to declare the size of this array. So let's go ahead and try it out. So we have two ways of declaring arrays in C#. Actually, two ways of declaring variables. The first one is we just declare var, let's say int array equals to new int, let's say 5 elements, right? Right now we have created an array, an integer array of size 5, and the other way is to create it like this: int array equals new int 5. But here we can't have two different arrays with the same name, so int array 2. So basically both declarations are the same. So actually what does the compiler do is, if we declare it like this, this is made for just to make your code be a bit more cleaner, and yeah, on compile time the compiler sees that, oh, you want to create an integer array, okay, this is gonna be integer array, this variable is going to be integer array. And for me, I prefer to write it like this because your code looks more cleaner, but it's up to you. I'll just write it in that style. I just want you to know that this is not the only way of declaring variable. Okay, so when we initialize the array, initially what we have here is we have created an array of length 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have an array of length 5 with default values. So all the arrays, when they are created, they fill each cell with a default value of the corresponding type. So in this use case we have integers, right? So the default value of integers is 0. So this is what we're gonna be having, and we have indexes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Let's see if this is actually true. Let's try to print something on the console. let's print, so how do we access a variable inside the array? We just type the name of the array, and inside the brackets we give the index at which we would like to access the variable. So let's print 0, right? And let's see what's gonna happen. Yeah, it printed 0, right? As you can see, the default value is 0. Okay, what if you want to print all the variables? So let's just create a for loop. So we have a for loop, right? So how do we get the length of the array? It's very easy. We type again the name of the array dot length, and voila, we have the length of the array. Actually, this will print us 5. Yeah, this will print a 5, but we get the length of the array dynamically, because it's not right to write 5, because sometimes we don't know the length of the array initially, and because sometimes here this is dynamic. This may be something console.read line. It can be something like this, right? So we can pass the length of the array from the console line, and that way we can't just hard code inside the for loop a number, because we don't know the length of the array. So a way more cleaner way to be sure that all the time we're gonna be going through the whole array is if we just get the length of the array after it's created. Int array dot length, right? And right now we are gonna print all the values of the array. So every time, so we start from index 0 until index length -1. Why it is -1? Because we don't have, we have smaller, only smaller. Because so when we get to length 4, this is gonna be our last iteration. If we create smaller or equals, we need to add -1, but this is useless. This is how do we go through the array. So right now we are gonna print all the 5 values of the array, which should be zeros, right? Yeah, you see, we print all the arrays. What's gonna happen if we try to print, let's say, if we try to print the 6th element at index 5, what's gonna happen? Should blow with exception array index out of bounds. Yeah, you can see that we still printed all the 5 values, so it went to 0, 1, 2, 3, index 4, and when it went to index 5, just the program says that index is outside the bounds of this array, so we can't perform this operation. Okay, so far so good. So we know how to declare array. We need to declare the type and the length of the array. This is a must when you're using an array, because the arrays are a fixed size and they store only one type of variable inside of them. And then how do we access array is from the index, and the index starts from 0, not from 1. So if we have array of size 10, we're gonna have elements from index 0 to index 9. We don't have index 10. This is something very important. And also we get the length of the array with the name of the array dot length. We're gonna get practically here 5. We can even test it right now. Let's just comment this out. I just delete it and see what, and print on the screen. Ooh, I have some character here. Okay, console dot write line and int array dot length. You can see 5, right? So please go ahead and try it yourself. You can just this is the easier way to understand how arrays work if you just go ahead and practice. So how do we assign values to the array elements? Very easy. I mean, you just it's the same way how you assign value to a primitive type like integer, but we need just to state here at which index you would like to save the variable. So if you want to save, let's say at first index, we want to have number 1. We have int array at, so again, which index is going to be at our first element? It's gonna be 0, yeah. So we want to have number 1 at element 0. We can also do it at element 1, so the at element with index 1, it means the second element, we can just assign number 2. And let's try and print all the values. Int array, so we start going through the array. We start from index 0 and until array.length, until the end of the array. And right now we need to print int array at the corresponding index with every iteration. Let's see what's gonna happen. So we each print 1, 2, 0, 0, 0 because all the other values are 0 by default, right? You can see 1, 2, 0, 0, 0. Okay. We can also assign variables with for loop, right? Let's create a for loop. So here is reading variables from array, and here we're gonna create the loop writing variables to array, right? Let's now create a for loop which writes variable. We're gonna have practically the same for loop, right? So we're gonna have int array.length, and then here we're gonna have at every index we can do, we can just say I plus 1, right? So we're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's see what's gonna happen. So here, what we do is we So here is what we do is we begin from index 0. We begin from here, right? And we say at index 0 we are gonna have 0 plus 1. So we're gonna have here 1. Then we go to the next one. We have 2, we have 3, we have 4, and we have 5. Here we're gonna write all those values to the array. And then in the second for loop we're gonna read from the array and print on the console, right? So here we're gonna do practically the same thing, but we're gonna read from the array. So this is how we write on the array. This is how we read from the array, right? Simple as pie, right? So this is what should print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's try it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So far so good, right? So again, as you can see here, accessing array elements is happening by choosing the index. As you can see, if we try to access an element which is out of the range of the array, we're gonna have index out of range exception. You have seen it, I have demonstrated to you. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do an example. So we're gonna have a string array that we're actually going to store the 7 days of the week. So another way to store values inside the array is like this. We can hard code some values. Here, as you can see, we can define array like this, string days, and then we can define the values on the same line. So actually what we can do is string days of week equals, and then here we can just say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, yeah. And then what we can do is we can access what we can do here is we can access each days of week. For example, if we access it with 0, it should print with index 0, it should print Monday, right? Print Monday. Yeah, prints Monday. So we can do it like this. We can also do it the way I told you. Var days of week, let's say second array, because we can't have the same variables with the same name. Then new string array of type of length 7, yeah. And then here we can hard code them like this: days of week 0 equals Monday, and so on. Days of equal 1, 2, oops, sorry, 4, 5, and then we start 2, 3, 4, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so on, right? But if you are going to be using an array with predefined values, you're not gonna get the values from anywhere. I suggest you use this approach because again it's more readable. As you can see here, it's not that clean. The code doesn't look that clean. What's gonna happen if we don't write anything in the... Let's try to access days of week. Days of week, actually here is 2. This array at index 5. As you can see, we don't have anything added at index 5. As I mentioned, when the array gets allocated in the memory, some default values are used. In the context of integer array, I told you that the default value is 0, but what is the default value of string? Default value of string is empty string, actually. It is empty string is actually this. This is an empty string. So it's the equivalent of this. Or string.empty. The same thing. So it's gonna print an empty string, right? Thursday, Friday. So if we try to access it, you can see here we have an empty string. Okay, so we have defined all the days of the week, and let's make a program that takes a number from the console line and prints out the day of the week. For example, if we type 1, it will print Monday. If we type 7, it will print Sunday. If we type 8, it will print no such day, right? So what do we need to do is, initially we need to predefine our days of the week. So we have them here, right? Then what we need to do is, we need to get the... We need to define a variable which is integer, and day of week, we need to get it from the console. Read line. Yeah. But what do we need to do here? We need to parse it. Oops. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. So right now what's gonna happen, because all the why do we need this int parse is because all the input is interpreted as a string, but we need an integer, right? And we need to parse the input from the console into integer and to assign it to this variable. So right now we have gotten let's print day days of week from, let's have input. from the input from the console, right? Let's see what's gonna happen now. So we have this, we enter 1, and Monday should appear, right? Oh, you can see Tuesday appears. Why is that? I'm gonna give you a hint. We access, from the input, we access the element inside this array with index 1. But we know that with index 1 we have Tuesday, with index 0 we have Monday. So what do we need to do is, we need to get the input minus 1. We need to show the input minus 1 because we want the first day of the week, but the first day of the week is Monday, it's not Tuesday. But we need to get it with 1, with index 0, not with index 1, right? So actually right now this will fix our program, and when we enter 1 we're gonna get the right day, Monday, right? But what happens if we, let's say, get 8, right? So we get an exception. The exception is the known exception, system index out of range. It means that we have inputted a number which is which is out of range of the predefined array. How can we handle this? Of course, we can handle this with an if statement. Okay, let's make an if statement. If input is smaller than 1, if input is bigger than, actually is bigger or equal than 1, and input is smaller than or equal than 7, right? Yeah, this is my bad. So we print out the day of the week, right? If the input from the console is in the range from 1 to 7, we're all good, right? Because our this will be inside the range of our array, right? Else, if it's something different, just print no such day. Let's see what's gonna happen. Let's start first day of the week, Monday, right? Okay, all good. Let's try to say 0, no such day. Okay, our program is working good. So we have covered all the edge cases. This is a very good mindset when you create a program. Just think of creating the program to be idiot-proof. It means that just imagine that you're an idiot and you start putting some really strange input, and the program should not give exceptions or something like that. It should tell you there is no such thing, please enter this and that. So in our use case, if we enter something bigger than 8 or smaller than 1, it should tell us there is no such day, right? So if we say, okay, what's the 7th day of the week? It's Sunday, right? So everything is good, right? What is the 8th day? There is no such day. So this is our really simple program, but this is a very good way to practice arrays. So that's actually the problem we have just managed to do. Here it says to write invalid day. It's the same, no such day or invalid day. We can do an invalid day, right? And it will still work. So here is the solution. Please try. After this, I'm showing you the solution. I'm gonna show you the solution of all the exercises in the lab. But please try to pause the video when we say what the problem is, and try to find the solution yourself. And then just unpause it and see how I managed to solve it. Because that way you're gonna understand better what we are doing. Because when you put effort, when you think about something by yourself, then it's easier to understand the fundamentals of what we're talking about. So try it yourself, and then we continue with the other interesting things about arrays. Okay guys, so let's continue with something a bit not for arrays. It's not connected for arrays, but it's connected with any values and all the types of variables that exist in the programming languages. And we're going to talk right now something very crucial when you start writing code. We're going to talk about values versus reference types. So I'm going to try to explain it for you as simple as possible, so you know what is happening in a method when you call a method with different types of variables, because sometimes the original variables, they get referenced and they get changed, and sometimes they don't get changed, they only get copied in the context of the method. I'm gonna try to explain it with two simple examples, but please do your research, read a bit more about what a stack is, what a heap is. I'm not gonna talk about what a stack and heap is right now, because it's a bit more complex and it's a bit out of scope, but you need to know this because for example, array is a reference type of variable of data structure, and we need to mention this. So let's begin with the value types. Here I have given you a link of value types in C#. We can see it here. Basically all the primitive types are value types. All the primitive variables are value types. As you can see, boolean, byte, char, decimal, double, and num. Maybe you don't know what a num is, but it's again out of scope. All the integers, long, uint, ushort, ulong, and etc. This is just for your information. I have given you that. Also, that variables of value types, they directly contain their data. What does that mean? That when you pass a variable to a method, if it's a value type, the value gets copied and gets passed to the method. Whereas in reference type, it's a bit more different, because reference types, they're like objects, and it will be very inefficient to copy the whole object inside the method, because value types, they're of a very small length inside the memory. So let's say that you want to copy an integer. Integer can be like 8 bytes, right? So 8 bytes is not a big of a problem in if you want to copy it. But let's say that if you want to copy a list, and this list has 2 millions of okay, let's not list, because we're gonna learn lists in the next lecture, but let's say array. Yeah, array. So if you want to pass an array to a function, to a different function, and this array has 1 million elements, right? If we copy those 1 million elements inside the method, and we call this method, let's say 5 times, all the time this value is gonna be copied, this array is gonna be copied, and at some point of the execution of the program we will run out of memory, and the program will say we can't proceed because all the memory is full, and your computer may explode. So yeah, it's connected with efficiency, with memory management efficiency. So that's why all the primitive types, they get copied, but all the other types of that they resemble like objects, they don't get copied, they get referenced with the address of the memory they reside, and they get changed straight away. You're gonna see now with the example. Don't worry if you don't understand that. In the example we're gonna make right now, everything's gonna be clear, I hope. So you can see that some of the reference types are like string, datetime, time span, random, and any other classes, interfaces, delegates, objects, and more. Why string? Because actually string maybe acts like a primitive data type, but actually string is array of characters. What a string is, if we have, let's say that if we have the string computer, underneath string is an array yeah, it is, oops, and so on. It is an array of characters. So all the arrays, they're reference type, and that's why string is reference type as well. So the variables of reference type, they store reference to their data. So actually they don't store the data themselves, but they store the address at which the data is stored, right? So with reference type, the two variables, they can reference the same object, and operation on one variable, they can both affect the object that is referenced by other variable. It means that they will change this variable. This is a very nice explanation. If we pass by reference, it means that, as you can see here, passing by reference is we don't copy the variable in the fillCup method, but we just refer to it by its address, and when we fill the cup inside the variable fills as well, right? When we pass by value, we copy the cup, and when we fill the cup inside the method, the cup variable is not filled. It's only filled inside the method because we copy it. Whereas when we use a reference type, we pass here we don't pass in this case we don't pass the value of the variable, we pass the address of the variable, so we know where it resides in our memory. So when we perform something, we're gonna change the variable, we're gonna change the original variable. Okay, let's have an example. Yeah, I have this example ready for you here. So what we have here is we have an integer of 5, and we have a method that we increment this integer with some value. You can see here we increment the integer with the value and so on. So what do you think we'll print here? We will print again 5, or we'll print 20? So the right answer is, let's see what the right answer will be. It will print again 5. Why is that? Because integer is of value type. It means that when we pass integer to a method, here the integer, this 5, it gets copied, and here we have 5, we have 15, and here the num is not this num variable. We just pass the value of num from here, and we don't change this num because we don't refer it, we don't know about it, we don't know where does it reside. We just get the value of num, which is 5, and we increment it inside this method. We don't change anything. So inside the context of this method, the num will be 20, right? But if we actually print here, num, it will print 20, right? It will print 20, but this is only in the context of the method that is called. Yeah, it's connected with, because this method is added in the stack, it's allocated some different memory for it, but let's just not get into details. You just need to know that if you pass a primitive variable, let's say integer, boolean, the value gets copied, and the value doesn't change the initial value of this variable. So let's give an example about reference type. So in order to use reference type, what we can do is we can create this integer, we can transform it into array of size 1, right? So this is array of size 1. We're gonna pass the first value, and here integer of size 0, value plus, okay, give it something like that. No, actually we're gonna pass an array, and then here we're gonna get num0 plus value. Yeah, we pass the array, we don't pass a number. So actually what happens right now here is, let's see first what's gonna be printed. Yeah, you can see here it says that it prints the type of the variable, because we need to, right now it says here this is an array of integer type, but we need to print this, right? We need to print the element, the first element of the array. So as you can see, it changed to 20, right? And this is because it's a reference type of variable. Why is that? Because here, when we pass here the whole array, we don't copy the whole array here. Here we pass the address. Address is something like 1, 2, something hex encoded, and this is the address inside the memory when this array resides. So when we actually perform this operation, it gets the array from the memory, changes it, and the initial array changes as well. So that's basically what value type versus reference type means, as you can see. So here is the example with reference type and with value type. Yeah. So go ahead and try it out. Use the debugger as well to see how the value changes. And yeah, have in mind that, so what you need to know is that primitive type of variables, they get copied inside the method, whereas the reference types, all the classes, all the other ones besides the primitive values, they get referred to them with the address where they reside inside the memory. So please try it yourself. Do the exercise 1 or 2 times. Use the debugger as well to see all the steps and to see that if we use a reference type, we use the same object and we don't copy it, but we just write to it. And yeah, it's a bit more complex term, so don't worry if you don't understand it, but it's good to know that when you start writing bigger and more complex programs with a lot of method calls, and sometimes it's gonna be strange for you and you're gonna say, oh my god, why this value doesn't change, or why this value keeps changing, I don't want this value to be changed, or something like that. And you need to be aware that there is such thing as value and reference types of variables. Okay guys, so let's see now how do we read arrays from the console, and using for loop or using string.split. This is something very important because most of the times we won't be having our array values hard-coded inside the code, as we have seen in the previous exercises, for example the problem with the days of the week, because in that case we know all the days of the week, so we can basically hard-code them. But in most of the cases we will be getting the information that will be stored inside the array from outside of the program. We're gonna be getting it as an input, right? So we need to know how to process this input and to put it inside the array, right? So let's get the use case where we have a console application, and we would like to create an array and to put some values dynamically from the console only. So initially, as we know, we have to define the length of the array, right? So first we need to read from the console the array length. How do we read it? It's trivial. We need to read the line from the console and then to parse this line into an integer, because all the input from the console line is interpreted as a string, as a sequence of characters, right? As we mentioned, string is a sequence of characters. It's an array of characters, basically. So after that, we need to create the array of the given size, and then with a for loop, we need to go through each index of the array, starting from 0, from index 0 until the end of the array, and we need to again to parse the input into an integer and to add it inside the array. So basically we will create a program that we define an array with a chosen length from us, and then we're gonna populate this array with some values. Okay, let's try to do this. So initially we're gonna have array length, which we're gonna take from the console, right? So after we have the array length, we have to create the array, right? So we're gonna either declare it like this, new int array length, right? Or with var, right? Same thing. There is no difference between both of the declarations. And then we need a for loop, right? We start from 0. We need to go through every index of the array. We start from 0 until array length. We can use the array length variable because we use it here to declare the array, or we can use array dot length. It's again the same thing. We're gonna use array dot length because you need to get used to using the dynamic getter of the array length. So right now what we need to do is assign at each position of the array, assign a number from the console line. So what we need to do is we need to get at each index of the array, we need in dot parse that's it, right? And then let's print the whole array. Again, we're gonna have for loop and array dot length. Right now we're gonna print it console dot not right line. We're gonna print it on one line. Let's print it on one line. Array index I. Then we're gonna print some white space so we can see some space between the between each element of the array. It's more readable. So let's run the program and see what happens. Right now we have to put a length of the array. Let's say array of 10, right? Then we have to start putting each number. Let's say from 0 to 10, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And as you can see, it prints the array. So we successfully created an array dynamically from the console line, read and populated this array with some values again from the console line, and then we have printed the values. Okay, but what happens if we don't want to press enter and in the same line to populate the array with this for cycle? What if I want to create like this? I want to have an array of 4, and then I want to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Bam. Right now we have system format exception, input string was not in the correct format. Yeah. There is a way to do that, and this is with string.split. So what string.split does is it takes a string and splits the string into an array, again array of strings. It splits it, but by a defined delimiter. Let's see right now. Again, as you can see here, arrays can be read from a single line, as I told you, by using values.split. Split actually. But again, as I told you, from the console line, everything is interpreted into character, into string. And when we split, the output of the split method is actually an array of strings, but we need to convert it into array of integers, right? So for this purpose, we need to go through each item from the array. We need to create a for loop and then parse each item, each string into integer. Okay, let's try it ourselves. Please, if you want to understand better, pause this video until now, try to do it yourself, and then unpause it to see the solution. So let's start again. So what do we need? What do we have right now is we have an input, right? We have a string input, which is equal so we are gonna have, as an input, we are gonna have something like this, right? And it's gonna be added inside this variable. But what we want to do is we want to create an array of strings from those. So what we actually do is we use dot split, and then here inside those brackets we need to define the delimiter by which we would like to split. If we have here, commas, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we're gonna split by a comma, right? But right now our problem is defined that they are space delimited. So when they are space delimited, we either use it like this, or the default constructor of this function is space, so we can just leave it like this. So can you guess why the compiler gives us some error? We can see here, represents the standard input, output, and errors for console. The class cannot be inherited. Yeah, so here we can read this: cannot implicitly convert type string array to string. Why is that? Because the output of the dot split method, you can see it returns a string array. So we need to have a string array here. Okay. So right now we are good. After we have the string, array with all the values separated, so we have this input, right? So actually what split is gonna do is, by the delimiter, right now it's white space, what it's gonna do is it's gonna do like this. It's gonna split all the values and add them into an array of the of the size of the input. So again, with index 0, 1, 2 until 6, right? So that's basically what dot split does. Right now what we need to do is, we want to have integer array, right? We don't want a string array. So we need to initialize the integer array. So we need integer. Okay, let's do it in this style. Integer array equals to new int. And now we need to define a length. So the length of the integer array should be the same as the input length, right? So we can get it dynamically. That's why I told you we need to get used of getting the input, the length of the array dynamically, because it is easier. Actually, we can also create a variable like integer array length, and we can get it like this here. If we're gonna use it more than one time, we can do it like this. But it's, again, this is up to you. This is up to the programmer to decide how it does look more cleaner. And yeah, we'll just use it with input.length, because it doesn't matter for me. Okay, so right now what we have is, we have two arrays, one string array which is populated and one integer array which is completely empty. It's actually not empty because it's populated with the default integer values as zeros, but we want to translate this, those values, we want to come to this array, right? So for this purpose, what we should do is, again, you should create a for loop that will go from 0 to input.length. It will iterate through the input array and write the values into the integer array. So we have integer array dot I equals to int dot parse input from I, right? This will actually do the work. What we are gonna do is, we take the string element, parse it into integer, and assign it to the integer array at the corresponding index. So both arrays are from the same length, so there should not be any array index out of bound exceptions or something like that. So everything should be alright. And let's again print the array, print the integer array, and see integer array dot length console write line, actually console write Okay, let's now see what will happen. So I just have an array of, say like that. So we should have array of length 1, 10, 11. This is gonna be 111. And again, you can see we printed the integer array. As you can see, we print the integer array. It means we have populated it. If we comment out this, okay, let's just do it like that. If we comment out these lines of code, it doesn't matter what we're gonna get. We're gonna get only zeros because the array has not been populated at all. Yeah, let's just add one white space here so we can distinguish each element. As you can see here, we have the integer array. We can also use the debugger integer array. You can see we have all the elements here. Again, please try it out and just play a bit with it. And this is actually the really fundamental part of how to read from the console, how to assign array. Again, be aware that when you read from console, and if you want to split, you need to split into string array, and yeah, that's it. Just play a bit with it. Thank you. Alright guys, so we have seen how we can read arrays from the console lines, from a single line, from multiple lines, and so on. I hope you understood it and you have practiced it, so you got an insight how you can manage to read arrays from the console line. Let's now see how we can print arrays. We have already used for loop to print arrays, but there are a couple of different methods with for each loop, and if you want to print a whole array on a single line, we can use string.join, which is a really nice way to print an array if you don't want to use a for loop and if you want to use only one line. And it's actually really nice to see. So to print all array elements, as we have seen, we can use a for loop. We can separate elements with white space or with a new line. As you can see here, we have an example. We have here an example to print each array on a single, on a different line. And let's see another ways of printing arrays, because I have always used this type of printing arrays. So we have another way of printing arrays. It's using for each loop. With for each loop, the code looks a bit more clean. As you can see, here is the example. I can show it to you. So we have, let's say, an integer arrays called integers. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, and we want to print it. So we create a for each loop. So we have a variable integers in the collection. So what we say here is, in this array, take each element, assign it with this variable, and we can do whatever we want with this variable inside the for each loop. So we can console write line, let's say, so write line integer plus white space, right? So right now we're gonna print the array. We can also use console write, which will print the array not on a new line, it will not print each element on a new line, it will print them next to each other, right? So let's see what will happen. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 on a single line, right? Okay. There is even easier way to print it. We can use string join. As you can see, the join method accepts 2 parameters as an input. So the first parameter is the separator, the delimiter we would like to have, and the second one is the array. So what we can do here is console dot write line string dot join, and here we have 2 parameters. The first is the delimiter, the separator, and the second is the integer array, right? Integers. So right now it should print 1, 2, 3, 4 with comma, right? Here, as you can see, it does the trick. You can print anything, like you can print it with, let's say, with this delimiter. You can print it with anything. Also, you can print it with no delimiter or with 1 space. So basically these are the ways to print the array. So the first one is just a simple for loop where we just go through each element and print it out. Integers. The second one is for each. Oops. Just to give you a quick hint if you haven't used Visual Studio before. So if you see here the for each comes here like a suggestion. If you press double tab, it will automatically fill and create the for each body for you. So you can rename the variables integer and integers, so it makes sense in your use case. And again, we print console.write line integer, right? So here are the 3 variants. The first one is this one, second one is this one, and the third one is this one. I think that the third one looks a bit more intuitive, cleaner, but it's up to you which one to use. So there is no right way or a wrong way. It depends on your style, on how you like to structure your code, and again, it depends on the use case. I would suggest you try to use either for each or console or string.join because it looks more cleaner and yeah, it's not that confusing because it's really easy to read when your program is like 20 lines of code. It's really easy to read it, but you're gonna start writing way bigger programs, and when your code base becomes larger, you need to refactor your code and make it look more intuitive and make it look easier to read from other developers, because a good developer is not someone who writes a code that is working. Everyone can write this code, but a good developer is to write a code, and when he leaves a company or when his code becomes legacy, someone else is read his code, everyone should be able to understand it. So write a clean code and document it. This is really, really important. And also name your variables according to the use case. Don't name the variables like a and something like this and something really strange. Actually, in the for loop, do you know why we name the variable I inside? Why it is like not a rule, but it's like an unofficial rule. Everywhere you see it I or J or something like that. So I comes from index. It's if you know this, it's easier to become intuitive in your head. Why do they use I? Why do they don't use I or something like that? It comes from index, but you can use any variable if you want. Okay, guys. So we have seen how to print arrays. Let's do some exercises and solve a couple of a bit more complex problems from the lab. And I suggest you, when you see the problem, just pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then continue watching the video with the solution. Thank you. Okay, guys, let's start with our live exercises in class. This is our lab. So please try to solve the problems yourselves. This way you will be able to understand and you will be able to practice a bit arrays. It's really important because after this lecture we're going to be talking about a bit more complex data structures like lists, and you need to be sure that you know the concept of an array, because this is the fundamental of data structures. Almost all data structures are based on arrays, but they extend the array functionality somehow. So let's see the first problem. So the first problem is reverse an array of integers. So as you can see here, we have the input on the console line and the output we should get from the program. So actually what we receive as an input is the first line is the size of the array, and then each input here consists of each element of this array. We have done the same thing during our initialization of array subcourse, I think 3 courses ago. So you should have this code. I also suggest you please reuse code. This is very important when that's how you become a good programmer. You don't write always everything from scratch. You reuse your own code. So try to save always to save your code. As I mentioned, you just create a GitHub account. You already know how to make a GitHub account. I hope you have one. So create a repository and try to reuse your code from your previous exercises, because they are linked in one way or another. Yeah, so this is one example input and output, and this is again one example input and output. So actually what we need to do is we should read an array of integers and then reverse the array and print it the other way around. Okay, so you can pause the video right now and you can try to do it yourself. I dare you to do that, because that way you can practice, and you can do it yourself, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so let's see what we need. Initially, we need a variable that we should store and read from the command line about the size of the array, right? So let's get array length equals to in.parse okay, so right now we have the length of the array, so we should initialize the array, right? Array new int array length, right? And right now we need to populate this array with elements from the console line. So we need a for loop. We need a for loop that will go through, that will start from index 0. Start from index 0 to, and will go through the whole array, element by element. So we need here array length, right? Array length or array.length. It's practically the same thing. Yeah. And here we have to add, for each index we have to add a variable from the console line. In.parse read line. Right now, after execution this line of code, we have the array, right? But right now we have to print the array in reverse order. We haven't done that before. So what we need to do is actually start iterating the array, but from the last index, the other way around, not from zero. As you can see here, we are iterating the array from 0 to array length, right? The maximum index will be the length of the array, right? Here we need to start the other way around. So we are going to be having one more for loop, but this time we're gonna be starting from array length -1, because you know that we start from 0 to array length -1. If we don't write -1, we're gonna get array index out of bound exception from the first iteration, because we start the reverse from the reverse order, right? Then we will iterate until I is bigger or equal to 0, and we will decrement I, right? And let's see what was we should print its elements on a single line, space separated. So on a single line we have console.write only. We will print array from I, plus we'll just delimit it with a space. So I guess this should do the work. Let's try it out and see what will happen. So let's get the first input. So it's 3, 10, 20, 30, right? Let's run the program. 3, 10, 20, 30. as you can see here, it is in reverse order. So the initial order was 10, 20, 30. We have here 30, 20, 10, right? So it's easy as pie, right? You need to understand that it doesn't matter how you're going to iterate through the array. Sometimes you're gonna need to iterate from the end to make a reverse iteration. Sometimes you're gonna need to make a normal iteration. This doesn't matter. Yeah, so basically we can try also the second example to make sure that it works, because most of the time different examples, they cover different edge cases. So you need to be sure that you cover all edge cases. Right now we don't have edge cases because all the edge cases, they're called by the if-else statement, and here we don't have if-else statements, but let's try it out. 4 minus 1, 20, 99, 5. So the array will be a size 4. The array will be a size 4, and this will be the array, right? So, okay. Let's run it. 4 minus 1. Oops. I'm sorry. Four minus 1, 20, 99, and 5. As you can see, again, the array is printed in a reverse order, right? So it's all good. So basically we are done with the first problem. As you can see, here is the solution. It's actually the same thing. So please go ahead, try it out yourself. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer you. And yeah, good luck. Okay guys, so let's see what is our second exercise in our class lab. So we have a rounding numbers problem. So we have to read an array of real numbers which are space separated values. So this means that we're gonna have to read an array from a single line on the console, and we have to round them in away from zero style and print the output as in the examples. So if you don't know what is away from zero style, don't worry, because we have a built-in function inside C#, and this is not really important. You can do your research, but don't worry if you don't know it. So let's begin solving this problem. So let's see, what do we have? Let's see one example. So this is our example input and our example output. As you can see, we're gonna be having two arrays. One array of integers and one array of doubles, right? So basically what we need to do is, initially we need to read the input from the console, and we need to store it inside a string array, right? Need string array. Okay? Then what we need to do is we need to convert this string array into a array of doubles, right? And then from this array of doubles, we need to go through it and round each number and to have an integer array with all the rounded numbers. And last but not least, we need to print them both. So we need to print on each line, we need to print the first element of the first array, then this symbol, then the first element of the second array, and so on, until we are finished. Okay, so let's try to tackle this problem. So we need to have, first we need to read the input array from the console line, right? So what we have to do is we have variable input, which is equal to console. You can reuse your code if you have like this code from previous exercises. You can reuse it. Console read line dot, and we need to split it again by a white space. Then we can use just the empty constructor. Not constructor, the empty method, because the default is this one. Or we can use it like that. Doesn't matter. When we have the string array, what we need to do next is we need to save all those values inside a double. So right now we have doubles array, new double with the same length. So and we need to populate the doubles array. Doubles array I equals to double dot parse, and then we parse the string to double, right? So right now we should be having our doubles array filled. Let's add some comments. Populating the doubles array. Right now populating the integer array with rounded numbers. Yeah, so in order to populate it, first we need to initialize it. Rounded numbers array, new int, again the same length as the input. So again we need to have a for loop. Again the for loop will go from the, it doesn't matter if we use doubles array dot length or input array dot length, because all of them are with the same length. Because I'm gonna use input dot length because it looks more cleaner. And right now what we need to do is we need to assign rounded numbers. Right now comes the tricky part. So from double to integer we can cast. How do we cast? Is we just write the desired value inside those brackets, and right now we should use a math function round math.round. Oh. Yeah, so rounds the double precision point to the nearest integral value. So right now we need to round the doubles array. We need to find the double like this. You can see this is so what away from 0 means, it means that you can read it here. When a number is halfway between two others, it's rounded toward the nearest number that is away from 0. So yeah, it's just we have it incorporated inside C#. So you can just use it. You don't. The output of math round is gonna do its job. So right now, even I don't remember that. If I need it, I just go Google it. I see Stack Overflow. I just write math round away from 0 style, and we can find it. I can even show you, like math round away from 0 style C#. You can see here examples. And you can see away from 0. I don't know it. I don't learn it by myself. Like, I just Google it and see it, and that's it. Don't think that I know everything and I try to remember everything. No, you don't have to remember everything. You have to know it in your head what steps you need to perform in order to solve a problem. If you solve this problem, it doesn't matter if you have looked in Google, if you have looked in Stack Overflow. This is, if you don't know by now, Stack Overflow is the programmer's best friend, so you should know how to use it. And it's a very good cheat sheet, actually. So actually, right now, what we have with this math.round round method is we round the number. As you can see, as a first value we get the double value, and as a second value we get the midpoint rounding mode. So this is actually something like an enum, and you have different as you can see here, you have different actually you have only two possible, two even or away from 0. So this depends on the problem, but the most important thing is, in our problem we have a case that we want to round a certain double into away from 0 style, and we know that we have to do that. If we had to do to even style, we just use to even. But right now we use away from 0, right? Right now we have both double and integer array. What we need to do right now is to print them, right? So again, we need one more for loop from 0 to let's say, doesn't matter, input.length. Again, all of them are with the same length. You have to be careful, because sometimes, and you're gonna see in the exercises, you're gonna receive arrays with different lengths, so you need to check so you don't get array out of bounds exception. But right now this is not the case, so there is no problem. And what we should print, let's see. So we should print the double array first. We should print the double array first, then this symbol, and then the rounded number element from the array. Okay, so we have, okay, so we print double doubles array first, then we print this symbol, right? Oh, we have some white space before and after, and we print the rounded numbers array. Printing the numbers. Okay, so I think that this should do the work. Let's see, let's test our program. Maybe I got something wrong, I don't know, we're gonna see right now. So as an input, the first you have 0.9, 1.5, 2.4, 0.9, 1.5, 2.4, 2.5, and 314, 0. As you can see, this here is the same, right? Yeah. So basically that's it. As you can see, this is the solution. Here in the solution, here I have written read numbers as a method. So you can try to do it that way. That's the cleaner way, actually. You should do a method, try to do it, that returns a double, array of doubles, and reads from the console line, parses the strings into doubles, and returns a double. It's not that hard, actually, but you should. So this logic should go to another method. You have already learned method, so it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so try it yourself, and let's proceed to the next exercise in our lab. Hello guys, and welcome to our live lab in our class exercises. So let's get on going with our last exercise that we will do in class, and let's see what is our problem. So what we have to do now is we have to reverse an array of strings. As you can see, how do we reverse the array of strings is we need to get the last element, and we need to make it first, and so on. So let's approach and see what we need and what we have to do. So initially, as you can see, we have an input of a string array from the console line. As you can see, inside the problem we have stated that we have space separated values. So what we need to do is we need to take the input from the console and split it by white space. So basically what we have to do is, oops, sorry. So we have variable, let's say array, right? So we have to read from the console and then split by white space, right? So in this array we're gonna be having our input, right? The ABCD array. Then what we need to do is we need to go through the array and swap the first and the last, and then go with each step, go towards the middle of the array, right? Let's create a method that will do this for us. So let's create a method that we provide him with the both indexes of which has to be swapped, and it swaps the elements inside the array. So we have a void method. So inside this method, what are we going to pass? Since array is a reference type, as we know, we can pass the whole array and then perform some operations inside the method, and this will reflect the original array. This will reflect here this variable, right? So we're going to be having a string array, because array is a string array. If you don't like it that way, we can do it like this. It's more readable in this case. And then what we need to provide the both indexes of the elements that have to be swapped, right? So we need integer I and integer j, which will represent the index of both elements that have to be swapped. So inside here, what we have to do is, so we need to swap, let's swap the last element to put it here, right? And then array. So right now, what we have done here, we have swapped the last element with the first one. But right now, we have to make the first element to be on the last place. But how we can do is that we need to store array I. So the first element, we need to store it somewhere, because right now we have lost the array I value. So we need to create a variable called outElement equals to array of I, right? And then array of I equals array of j, and then array of j equals to outElement, right? So basically this will be our swap element method. What we need to do right now here is, let's see, so we need to go not until the end of the array, but we need to go until the middle, because if we go until the end of the array, we're gonna swap twice and the array will be the same, right? Because we're gonna swap A with E, and then when we go to the end, we're gonna swap E with A, which is basically will result in the same array. So we need to create a for loop, right? And it will start from 0, but it will end to array.length divided by 2. You may ask, what if the array is of length 5, right? Because here we have A, B, C, D, E. If it is of length not divisible by 2, this value, when we divide by 2, will result in a rounded number. Let's say if we have 5, if we store 5 divided by 2 in an integer, it will give us 2. And this is completely fine for us, because if we have an array with length not divisible by 2, we just want to go not until the middle, because in this case we have C in the middle, right? And C, we don't want to change it, right? It stays there. So we just want to go to A and B, and this will do the job. Array length divided by 2, right? Then what we actually do is, with every iteration, we call swap elements, we pass the array, we pass I, which is, so right now we pass the first index, right? We pass the first index. Then we need to pass the second, the opposite one from the reverse side. How we can pass this is, we can, with every iteration, we can just get the array length minus the first index, because here the first index is 0, right? In the first iteration we are gonna have 0, and then we have to get the array length minus 0 minus 1, because minus 1 we start from 0, yeah? So actually what we have to do is, in order to get the reverse index, what we do is we get array dot length minus 1 means we'll get the reverse index, and minus I, it means that we will get the corresponding index from every iteration. Here initially I will be 0, right? So we'll get length minus 1, which is E. Then from the second iteration I will increment to 1, right? Then we'll get B, and then the other index should be array minus the array length, the reverse index, minus 1. Then we'll get D, and so on and so on. So basically this will do the work. We're gonna be having the swapped elements, and then we have to print the whole array. Let's see how we have to print it. With a space delimiter on one line, console dot write line, then string dot join. This is the separator, and then the array, and this should be it. So let me just note that when we pass this array here, the array is a reference type variable. So it means that inside this method, actually we are not copying the array, we're just passing the address of the memory where the array resides. So all those operations here, they modify this array, right? So actually when we print, in the end, when we print the array, we're gonna get the updated, the reversed array actually. So let's try the program and see a primary input. The first is A, B, C, D, E, right? And it should return E, D, C, B, A. A, B, C, D, E. E, D, C, B, A. Let's try something A, B, C, D, E, F with one more word. F, E, D, C, B, A. Right? So it works. I forgot to mention maybe you know that, but on every problem you can check your solution in our judge system. So how does judge work? It provides you with some tests. So we have here reverse an array of strings, and what you basically do is you just copy the whole code, paste it here, you select the language type, and you press submit, and you have to wait a bit of time for the whole test to be processed, and just wait for a couple of seconds, and then you can just press refresh and see how many percents you got. As you can see, we have a couple of tests here, and all they passed. So it means that our exercise is alright. So guys, here is the solution. Please try again. Don't just continue watching the video if you haven't solved the problem. if you do this, it's alright, but I doubt that you will learn arrays that way. You have to code it in. The whole information has to go through your brain. If you only watch, it will seem intuitive. You're gonna say, oh yeah, this is how you do it. But at the end, when you got a real problem, when you go to the exam, you're not going to be able to resolve those problems because you don't practice. So please practice a lot. And basically, this is our this is not our last exercise from the lab, as you can see. So we are until the reverse an array of strings, right? This was our last exercise that we are going to be doing here, but you have two more left. You have some arrays and condense array to number. So you have all the hints. Oh, you have one more, yeah. I'm not going to do that as well because you need to go to a couple of exercises by yourself. So please go ahead. You have enough hints. So all those hints are actually the workflow of your program. So in the hints, the solution is included in the hints. You just have to translate it into a C# code, right? If you do all the previous exercises, you can reuse your code. I'm pretty sure you're gonna make it. So go ahead and try it out, guys. It's really easy and it's fun. So please try to do this and do it yourself. Thank you, guys. Okay, guys, so we are at the end of our arrays lecture and it's time for a summary. So what did we learn today is that arrays hold elements of the same type. They have fixed length, and all the elements that an array contains, they're numbered from 0 to the length -1 of the array. So let's see. Actually, this is what an array looks like, right? It has a fixed length. Sorry for not the good drawing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So right now we have an array of size 7. So the last index will be length -1. So here the last index will be 6, right? And the first one, because the first one is not 1, the first one is 0. This is how we access elements. How do we access elements? If you want to access the element from the first element of the array, what we practically do is we type the name of the array, and inside those brackets we just say the index, right? Okay, how do we assign variables to the array? The same thing. We just have to state, let's say in the last element we want to save, if we are storing integers, we want to save the number 100, right? So this is how we assign values inside the different position in the array. Also, something very important for the array is that inside the memory, when you define the array, the memory is reserved for this array, and depending on how much space a single value, a single element of the array it holds, the program can calculate how many memory do we need for the whole array. For example, if you're going to be storing a 32-bit integer in an array of size 10, we're gonna have 320-bit array, and also inside the memory, all the elements are next to each other. I'm saying this because in the next exercise, in the next lecture, when we're going to be talking about lists, they are based on arrays, but inside the memory, elements are not stored next to each other, and it's a bit more complicated, so you need to know that. Okay guys, so elements are numbered from 0 to length -1, as we have shown. How do we create and allocate an array? As you can see here, this is how we initialize an array. We have in C#, we have one more way, just to declare a variable, and then new, and then the length of the array. Practically the same thing. Depends on you, which you consider most clean. This is how we define an array with predefined values. So as you can see here, we don't state the length of the array because we hard-code the values, and it can get the length when we declare the values. Here the array will be of type of length 3, right? So how do we access elements in the array? We access them by the so-called index. We begin from 0 to the length -1. And how do we print? This is actually the best way to print with string.join. Then we have two input parameters that we have to consider. The first input parameter is the delimiter. The second input parameter is the array. Right now, if we have this array, it is going to be to print it if we use here, if we have nums, right, the name of this array, and if we have here a delimiter, let's say this delimiter, only I, it's gonna print this array like this, 1, 2, 3, and that's it. So that's the best way to print an array in one line without using for loops and stuff like that. It's very easy, intuitive, and please guys, it looks like it's intuitive, but go ahead and do your exercises. So do your lab exercises, and then we begin with the exercises that are for your homework. We're gonna do a couple of them. You have, I think, 10 or 11 exercises. We're gonna do a couple of them in class, and then I'm gonna go through most of them and give you some hints, so you can not being desperate that you don't know how to do a certain thing. But trust me, if you do all your lab exercises, the other ones will be not easy, but they will be doable, right? So see you in the exercise session, guys. Bye.